and from the diaspora, decided to mark the 250th anniversary of the Barbie Slave Rebellion with an all-day forum discussing the state of the African Guyanese, assessing where we are, where we were, where we are, and where we should be as a people. Every year since then, this organization, the Cuffy 250 Committee, is committed to a yearly forum, a yearly national forum, where African Guyanese from all walks of life can meet in one physical space and engage in discussion about the challenges facing us as a people, and crafting an agenda to overcome those challenges. The theme for this year's forum is repositioning African Guyanese for justice, recognition, and sustainable development. This year's event is a follow-up from the August 2016 forum, where President Granger charged the forum to craft a plan of action for the International Decade for People of African Descent. After that forum, a larger body consisting of African organizations was formed. The International Decade for People of African Descent Assembly, IDPAD, is a direct product. This year's theme creates observances of the United Nations Declaration of the International Decade and promotes international awareness and actions on these issues. Today's forum allows us the scope to look at the past 100 years and gaze into the next 100 years. What is the African Guyanese economic, political, and cultural agenda? And where does reparatory justice fit in? As we engage in these and other related questions, Cuffy 250 urges that we should not ignore the uncomfortable truth about the state of the African Guyanese community over 250 years after the Barbie Slave Rebellion and 179 years after the end of chattel slavery. I thank you. Now, as your chair, the awesome privilege is mine to welcome Dr. William Ajukro. Let me tell you something about Dr. Ajukro. He is presently the PAHO WHO representative for Guyana country office. He acquired a Bachelor's of Science degree in Human Biology at the University of Science and Technology, School of Medical Sciences, Kumasi, Ghana. After working in Ghana for about 5 years, he went on to complete his master's in public health with focus on maternal and child health program management from Columbia University, Mailman School of Public Health, New York. He continued with a Doctor of Public Health degree with a major in socio-medical sciences with emphasis in survey research from the same university. Within PAHO WHO, Dr. Ajukro worked as a technical officer while simultaneously sharing his knowledge and experience with public health students from the Columbia University of Mailman School of Public Health. As a pro bono adjunct professor for the post-grad interns, later Dr. Ajukro moved again to Barbados, serving as the sub-regional advisor for family and reproductive health. He assumed office in Georgetown, Guyana, as PAHO WHO country representative. He holds this post until now. So please put your hands together for Dr. William Ajukro as to bring greetings on behalf of the UN.
Thank you, Chair. His Excellency, President David Granger, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Chairperson, Ms. Tonika Johnson, Ministers of Government, colleagues from the United Nations agencies, facilitators, members of the Diplomatic Corps, civil society representatives, special invitees, media representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity to offer remarks on behalf of the United Nations Country Team at today's forum. The 2015-2024 International Decade for People of African Descent, proclaimed by the UN General Assembly reiterates, among others, that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights and have the potential to contribute constructively to the development and well-being of their societies. Across the globe, African diaspora continue to suffer inequality and disadvantage because of the legacy of slavery and colonialism. Freedom from violence, prejudice, and discrimination are a distant dream for many. The International Decade provides a solid framework for the United Nations, member states, civil society, and all other relevant actors to join together with people of African descent and take effective measures for the implementation of the program of activities in the spirit of recognition, justice, and development. In Guyana, Africans form part of the country's historical foundations from the over 2 centuries of slavery until emancipation in 1838. People of African descent in Guyana were a symbol of resilience and heroic struggle for civil rights and independence. Since independence, sterling contributions by renowned Afro-Guyanese have added to the country's development, the Caribbean, and beyond. We take this opportunity to salute the many generations of people of African descent for their struggles, sacrifices, and contributions that are woven into Guyana's social fabric today. Later in October, on the government's request, a UN working group of experts on the people of African descent will be visiting Guyana. Guyana is a nation of ethnic diversity living within an extremely rich biodiversity. The United Nations works together with the government and state institutions, civil society, private sector, and communities in the 2030 agenda with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We are supporting the government's formulation of the Green State Development Strategy, the National Development Pathway to achieve the SDGs. We are working in various development initiatives in the 10 regions to make the SDGs a reality for the people of the ground. The SDGs are the people's agenda, a plan of action for ending poverty in all its dimensions, irreversibly, everywhere, and leaving no one behind. In effect, it is about a good life for all. In Guyana, it is particularly important to enhance cohesion and cooperation within society, while recognizing the identity and value of all the ethnic groups. Ethnic diversity and biodiversity should be a uniting force for Guyana to achieve the SDGs. The International Decade of Peoples of African Descent is a reminder of the value of human rights, human dignity, human freedom. We have to make a conscious effort to remember the sacrifices of those before us and to stop and prevent discrimination, hate, violence, marginalization of all peoples. Mr. President, the United Nations Country Team will continue to support you, your government, and the people of Guyana to make this a reality.
Hotep. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom alaikum. Jah Rastafari, peace. All protocols observed. On August 7th, 2016, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency Mr. David Granger, advised the African populace to organize and mobilize. Don't agonize. It's time to organize, time to mobilize, he said. These words were given to the African community in an effort to give effect to the United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent, which aims to have African people of African ancestry, enjoying full and equal participation in all aspects of society via the strengthening of national, regional, and international action, and through cooperation in relation to the full enjoyment of economic, social, cultural, civil, and political rights. To promote a greater knowledge of and respect for the diverse heritage, culture, and contributions of people of African descent to the development of Guyana. To adopt and strengthen national, regional, and international legal frameworks in accordance with the Durban Declaration and Program of Action and the International Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and to ensure their full and effective implementation. On that occasion, His Excellency said, there needs to be now an organization and a plan in order to ensure the implementation of a program of action which focuses on expiation, education, employment, equality, and economics as we strive for recognition, justice, and sustainable development. This charge, brothers and sisters, led to the formation of a core group which eventually morphed into the International Decade for People of African Descent Assembly Guyana Country Coordinating Mechanism, a unique bunch of people who have, like our forebears who we embrace today, surmounted debilitating odds to make today a reality. We all need to congratulate ourselves. On November 6, 2016, His Excellency was apprised of, by way of a letter, of a machinery to be established and a process to be initiated for the crafting of the plan, which would be developed along the following lines: field research, solicitation of recommendations in the compilation of a plan, information gathering on the state of the African Guyanese community, review of literature, the administration of a questionnaire, review of that literature, and today, Cuffy 250's 5th annual State of African Guyanese Forum, which will be the occasion for the presentation of the IDPAD's findings, which will be subjected to workshop deliberations, the report of which will be considered in the preparation of the final plan. The workshops of which you will be a part will provide for an opportunity for the wider community to review not only the process, but the recommendations arising from that process, thus furthering the finalization to the plan, a copy of which has already been availed to His Excellency. This plan is intended to respond to the incredulous acts of and the removal of the legacies of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance leveled against Africans in Guyana, all of which were sponsored by the state, nationally and internationally. These acts of state-sponsored education, economic, entertainment, legislative, anti-labor, political, domestic, spiritual, and mental warfare have left African Guyanese, who once produced 100% of the nation's gross domestic product, now sharing less than a paltry 5% with the 9 indigenous tribes of Guyana. We are responding to an international crisis and an international mandate to do something about our condition, which is a grim but unrecognized one. Today, we choose to trace on this grim canvas a picture of hope, of determination, and success. We thank Brigadier Retired David Granger, now His Excellency President of the Cooperative Republic, Gay McDougall, Dudu Dien, and the IDB Social Inclusion Survey, among others, for leaving footprints in the sand of our grim reality. Brigadier Granger opined some years ago on the probability of Africans in Guyana being re-enslaved by drugs and the satanic cultus of the death squads. A vulnerability introduced by urban and rural poverty, estrangement from identity, domestic abuse, vulnerability to preventable diseases, abandonment of agricultural production in favor of exploitative financial relationships, semi-literacy, indiscipline, lack of commitment to learning, unruliness, a proliferation of teenage pregnancies, recidivism among young men, and susceptibility to seduction into a life of crime. The litany of woes in the African community is enhanced by unemployment, poor education, poor family relations, poor nutrition, poor health, and poor housing, and which are all an imposition of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and their related intolerance. Sister Gay McDougall spoke of a continuing social malaise, unexplained despair, anger and resistance, exclusion, discrimination, and criminalization, excluded from full national involvement, denial of employment and economic opportunities, stigmatization, males and entire African communities being stigmatized, derogatory stereotypes of criminality, distorted wider societal perceptions of African Guyanese individuals and communities, scarcity of employment opportunities for women, the heavy burden of care shouldered by single mothers, domestic violence, poverty, unemployment, and unequal levels of political participation. Speaking generally, Dien identified a profound moral, emotional, and political fatigue arising out of the individual and collective impacts of ethnic polarization. But it is the findings of the AGDA IDB Social Inclusion Survey which are the most frightening and the clearest of clarion calls to every African Guyanese to come to attention, irrespective of whether you are Christian or non-Christian, rich or poor, urban or rural, professional or artisan, sick or well, conscious or not conscious. For if we don't make use of the opportunity now, we will not have a viable and sustained society in the immediate future. The findings in this survey show our young people's perceptions of their society as being consistent with Granger et al. The young people expressed opinions of being discriminated against, low in trust, stigmatized, inequitable recipients of resources, locked out of participation in the society more because of race than lack of qualifications or gender. Criminalization, which has had a negative impact on residents in the communities to which they belong, felt that their communities were under siege, profiled, stopped and searched, felt insecure, had a negative perception of Guyana, thought that the country was a tense place, and thought that more institutional support for Africans was needed. Astonishing, frightening, and disturbing was their thinking that ignoring the discrimination which they faced and having faith in God would pull them through the hardships only. Community action carried a low premium, but they were significantly at odds with those who saw being of African ancestry as negative. Their perception that they were inferior to other races and that Dr. Jagan was correct about the bottom of the latter statement were riveting revelations. They thought that the culture of business and business support were below par in their homes and lived with the expectation of being tortured by the African-dominated joint military forces. It is against this background of darkness, doom, and despair that the core group most humbly recommends to all gathered policies, programs, and projects in education, economics, equality, employment, expiation, and generally for your review in the workshops. where you will get an opportunity not only to review the process and the recommendations arising from the process, but furthering the finalization of a plan of the copy of the report. To achieve recognition for African Guyanese, 4 education policies, 8 education programs, and 16 educational projects are recommended. To achieve justice, 3 education policies, 3 education programs, and 14 education projects are recommended. To achieve sustainable development, 1 education policy, 4 educational programs, and 6 educational projects are recommended. The rest of the programs and projects are in the handouts which you should have received. Other recommendations of a general nature aimed at achieving recognition, justice, and development under the 5 E's include 15 educational policies, 1 educational program, and 3 educational projects. Seemingly, Mr. President, the story of the frog adjusting to the heat of the boiling water is true, ignoring the rising temperature until it is boiled alive. In order for Africans in Guyana not to be boiled alive, the following actions are necessary. There is the need for the immediate establishment of a secretariat, its full funding, and an enabling environment to facilitate the effective and efficient execution of its mandate. The granting of the charter, which has been submitted to your government, is one of the first steps in the movement towards achieving the objectives of the decade. The Secretariat will then initiate necessary studies to ascertain the conditions of Africans in various communities, even as it initiates a widespread and concerted education program in African communities on the decade and its potential to impact African strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. In its interface with government in relation to the plan and its implementation, affirmative-type expediency is necessary to give effect to its effectiveness. Curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular education must receive a premium of attention, even as the government and people of Guyana engage in affirmative-type nationwide programs to establish equality in education, in identity, and in other areas in which the inequity exists. Strategically, Mr. President, the establishment of a commission to implement the Durban Declaration and program of action is an important step. The Land Commission's work is noted, as land is the basis of the creation of wealth. Amen. A speedy implementation of the findings of the Commission's work is another important first step. And in order that that land be made useful, the granting of license for financial institutions, such as banks, etc., which will facilitate Africans in Guyana access to capital, is of great importance. The issuance of tax holidays and other concessions from institutions such as Go Invest are necessary. An absolute premium is to be placed on the principles of inclusiveness and full and prior consultation and full agreement in the actions designated for the decade and beyond. In this way, the historical derecognition of justice and underdevelopment will be significantly impacted for the better of those who died to make this nation a possibility. This plan is specific to us. It is measurable by the revolution in real and sustainable development in our communities. It is achievable through our efforts. It is relevant to our present, our past, and our future, and must see us sparing no effort in time nor effort to see it come through. Let our children return to school for the 2017-2018 academic year feeling that something new, something good is happening for them. That at last, the light at the end of the tunnel is not that of the onrushing train, but it is theirs to a bright future. Mr. President, we thank you for the challenge and the opportunity. We will not disappoint you, Mr. President. We will be successful.
Thank you. Please be seated. If at this stage I still need an introduction, I haven't been doing my work for the last 2.5 years. Dr. William Adukro, the PAHO WHO representative, Mr. Jonathan Adams, I think chairperson of the conference today, and member of the CCM, Ms. Kamika Johnson, chairperson of the committee, officials, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, today is very significant. 7 hours from now, I shall be at Kitty paying homage to the martyrs of the Demerara Revolt. As you know, 200 Africans were massacred on the morning of the 20th of August, and today is the 20th of August. A very significant day. The majority of Africans were massacred in what was then the plantation of Bachelor's Adventure on the East Coast. And those of you who know Bachelor's Adventure would know that the villagers themselves erected a simple monument in their community center to commemorate this event some years ago. We remember also in August the Essequibo Revolt at La Belle Alliance. That was on the 3rd of August. And you heard homage being paid to the martyr of that revolt, Damon, who was brought to Georgetown and hung outside what is now known as the Parliament building. We remember also the Maroon Revolt. Many Guyanese don't even know we had Maroons. But in 1795, around the same time that the Haitian Revolution was being fought, there was a very serious revolt, perhaps one of the 3 or 4 most serious revolts in Guyanese history, which took place on the West Demerara, particularly in the backlands of the Burisiri. And that revolt was not suppressed for several months until September 1795. And most of all, we remember happily the 1st of August, 1838, when over 85,000 Africans regained their freedom from 2 centuries of enslavement. But we are assembled today not as a ritual of remembrance of past events. We are assembled here today to plan for the future, to consider the implementation of measures to achieve the aspiration of those martyrs and to fulfill the expectations of emancipation. We're assembled here today, and I'm pleased at the presence of a representative of the United Nations system to concentrate our attention on 2 resolutions. The first, as you heard, is the United Nations General Assembly Resolution of 2013, December 2013, which designated the 1st of January 2015 to the 31st of December 2024 as the International Decade for People of African Descent. And the second resolution, the United Nations General Assembly Resolution of November 2014, which adopted a program of activities for the implementation of the International Decade for People of African Descent. You would recall, my brothers and sisters, that I was invited by a group of African Guyanese organizations, and I don't see Sister Penda here, but she is always a mover. I see her husband, Rudy. Where is Sister Penda? Okay. But I was invited by a small group, and those of you who saw the photograph in the newspapers in January 2015 would realize that it was indeed a small group. It's a very inauspicious inauguration of the decade. And at that time, I made some remarks which I think they've been reproduced in one of the booklets which are available at the back. I addressed that inauguration on the 24th of January 2015 at the Independence Park. And Brother Eric Phillips invited me again later that year on the 20th of May to address the Youth Reparations Rally, again at the Independence Park. And I was invited here again last year by the Cuffy 250 Committee right here at Critchlow Labour College on the 7th of August. And here I am again today. I'm not attending a rally, I'm attending a workshop because we have work to do. My brothers and sisters, the United Nations General Assembly Resolution of 2014 called on member states to take concrete and practical steps to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance faced by people of African descent. The resolution outlined areas of action by member states, and the Cooperative Republic of Guyana is one of those member states. We therefore have an obligation, not an option. We have an obligation to take action in accordance with the United Nations Declaration. Last year, I committed the government of Guyana to support the program of activities. And I was happy to learn that there has been agreement among several organizations which form the core group called the International Decade for People of African Descent Assembly, country coordinating mechanism, the CCM. So we are moving. I congratulate and compliment the CCM on bringing us here today and on producing the documents. I was very happy to receive a copy of the report, and I sincerely commend that report to everyone present, in fact to the entire Guyanese nation and the government. It needs to be studied, and I'm sure that during the course of today, some of the findings of that report will be carefully examined. The report is not going to be ignored, but I urge that 3 specific objectives of the program be considered. And those objectives, as stated before, are to strengthen national, regional, and international action and cooperation in relation to the full enjoyment of economic, social, cultural, civil, and political rights by people of African descent, and their full and equal participation in all aspects of society. to promote a greater knowledge of and respect for the diverse heritage, culture, and contribution of people of African descent to the development of societies. And thirdly, to adopt and strengthen national, regional, and international legal frameworks in accordance with the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, and the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and to ensure their full and effective implementation. These are not empty words, my brothers and sisters. You can see what is happening in other continents, in other jurisdictions, in which race groups, hateful groups committed to hatred, racial hatred, are still doing their evil work and are still bringing about discrimination against people of African descent and other ethnic groups. So this is not an idle task or an idle objective. It is not my objective today to scrutinize the CCM's report. And I ask this conference to begin its work today. It's a voluminous report, I think 187 pages. I'm not sure you have enough time today to do that. But it does not mean that this session today would dissolve and wait another 365 days before it considers the report. I'm sure that Brother Jonathan Adams is ingenious enough to devise a means by which the report could be scrutinized over coming days and weeks so that we get a work plan out of the report. The CCM needs to work purposefully and quickly. As I said before, the decade was launched in 2015, 40 months ago. In fact, 1/3 of the decade has expired. 40 months of the 120 months have expired. So we now have to accomplish in 2/3 of that time what we should have accomplished in 10 years. I would like to warn also that as far as the state is concerned, in July we began our budget cycle, and within 10 weeks, the budget for financial year 2018 will be presented in the National Assembly. When Parliament comes out of recess in October, I shall be going to Parliament to present the government's budget and legislative agenda. Not the entire budget, but the main principles, the main elements of the budget. In other words, if financial allocations are to be made to support the United Nations Declaration, those allocations have to be determined within the next 10 weeks. This gives you a sense of the urgency with which we need to consider this plan before us. I would therefore urge members of the CCM to consider 3 elements which should be dealt with over the coming hours. First of all is the organization. The report is before us today. Many of you have not seen it. And even when you see it, you'll need some time to go through it. But the opportunity presents itself for the CCM to define and refine the architecture and to erect an economical structure. Vincent is laughing when I use the word economical. You know, the law of limited resources. To erect an economical structure to bear the burden of the work to be done. So we have to pay attention now to the organization which is going to carry the program through the next 80 months. The second thing is education. You know, more than 200 years ago, a poem was written which goes like this. It starts like this. A little learning is a dangerous thing. I urge the CCM not to ignore the validity of our history. At the same time, I urge the CCM to ensure that the documents it puts forward in its own name and the name of this international decade are based on the best information. The decade must be forward-looking. It is about the next decade. It's not about the last decade or the last century. The plan should be about the future. The decade is too important to become an opportunity for racial or religious recrimination, or to become an outlet for fake history. Real history requires rigorous research, not rancor, not the repetition of popular myths and legends. Let us fight one war at a time, and let us not try to refight old battles of the past, which do not contribute to our mission. Education is needed, and I've just given Dr. Adekro 2 books which are available to those of you who get there first. And I am willing to assist with the reproduction of books, of those books, if the Cuffy 250 committee feels that there is need to reproduce them. One of them deals with my presentation here last year, and I think the other deals with my presentation at the Reparations Forum at Independence Park. But believe me, education is very, very important. Some people do not know the significance of 20th of August, 1823. Some people do not know that there were Maroons in Guyana, and there was a Maroon War raging on the West Coast in 1795. So there's more ignorance than intelligence in the world today. And I urge that we create a sound basis for the International Decade to be observed, and we do not allow ourselves to be blown away by fake history. Who has ears? The third thing I would like to leave on the table today is, of course, and you may feel is the most important, that is implementation. The achievement of the decade's ambitious objectives should not be underestimated. As I said, already 40 months have slipped by, and we need to work very hard to ensure that the next 80 months are used to achieve our objectives. So we should not deviate, we should not allow ourselves to be diverted from our mission. My brothers and sisters, the opportunity presented by a United Nations decade is unlikely to present itself during our lifetime. My brothers and sisters, we recall the fate of the United Nations International Year for People of African Descent, which began on the 1st of January 2011. Many people in this room would remember how the government of the day converted that event into a song and dance show. And there's nothing to show for the International Year. Nothing to show for the International Year. This must not be the fate of the International Decade. My brothers and sisters, this is not the time for bickering and brawling and for breaking down. It's time for building up. There's a little book which was published by the Free Press about 18 years ago. It was based on an essay by Professor McGowan about the Demerara Revolt. On the cover of that little book, and on the cover of a bigger book called Themes in African Guyanese History, there's a drawing by the artist Barrington Braffett. When you see Barrington Braffett, and when you see the book, ask him what it meant. And he's going to tell you what it meant. He's going to tell you what it meant. It meant that on the morning of the 20th of August, even as the British troops had started priming their rifles, some of the rebels were bickering among themselves. Bickering seems to be a preoccupation of some people in this country. All I urge is that this is not the time to bicker. This is not the time for brawling. This is not a time for breaking down. This is the time for organization, for education, and for implementation. This is a decade of determination, and our children and grandchildren will not forgive us if we fail them at this critical time. May God bless you all.
This is not a time for bickering and brawling, not a time for breaking down, but for building up. And he said it twice. Share upward movements. We must thank His Excellency President Granger for that timely presentation. Yes, I think it deserves another round of applause. Okay, before the President leaves, we will have a poem by Miss Emancipation 2016, Miss Delisha Wright. And as she is coming to the stage, I would just like to big up Miss Emancipation 2017, Miss Aminaya Kurt, who is the first queen to be crowned pregnant.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. His Excellency David Granger, esteemed panel, brothers and sisters, a pleasant good morning to you all. It's an honor to be at the 5th annual State of the African Guyanese Forum, and I am very privileged, excited to share with you a poem that I wrote a year ago about the mark that our ancestors made, the state of brothers and sisters in Guyana, and where I would like to see my fellow brothers and sisters and myself in the future. So sit back and relax. What are your aspirations in life? Please, don't tell me it's to get some grade 1s at CXC and find yourself a good job. Because I know of persons with diplomas and degrees and are still jobless, much less your CXC, so please. What I'm about to say is sad, however true. Many of us are living under a curse and have no clue. He, a tout, a drug dealer. She, a commercial worker, a baby mama, is all they will ever be. Somebody needs to tell these kids they all can't go after one career. If they all aspire to fight wars and fire, not forgetting fighting each other, who are going to be the scientists, technologists, engineers, and mathematicians the world is seeking to hire? We are quick to say we are comfortable with where we are in life. We are comfortable, that's the word. Too many times we get caught up in being comfortable with the state of our lives, forgetting the many ventures out there which can move us from being just comfortable to a state whereby we can sleep peacefully at night without having to worry about what we will eat tomorrow. You see, the world is moving at a fast pace. Men are making clones, some are walking in outer space. And if we don't equip ourselves for this race, in the future we will have no place. There is a struggle out there, I know, but I refuse to let it hold me back. I know about if we ladies don't install those 40,000 bundle Brazilian weaves and tone our skin, in most companies we won't get in. I know about if our young men don't cut their locks and trim their froze, they are unfit for certain jobs and are deemed thieves, fugitives, and a futureless generation. I know about applying at entities that has vacancies, only to hear, the spot is taken, ma'am. Try again next time, please. Sad thing about it all is that we, the oppressed, would often be the oppressors. Look upon me, O elders, this little black child. I am capable of doing good. Instead of condemning me, in part acknowledging me, pray for me. The cry for freedom just didn't start with Beyonce, no. Freedom, freedom, I can't move. Freedom, cut me loose. I break chains off of myself. Won't let my freedom rot in hell. It started with our ancestors years ago when their true identities were taken from them and were labeled slaves. The cry for freedom started when they were forced to work under harsh conditions in the fields, in the sun, in the rain, when they were mercilessly beaten with whips and cane, and in their excruciating pain, they cried, freedom! And so the mantle of freedom was passed on from one generation to another, until it reached generations that gave birth to powerful men and women like George G.M. James, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, Maya Angelou, Nelson Mandela, who weren't hesitant to run with it. Now the mantle is in our hands. What will we do? We will run in unification. What is unity? Unity, the 1763 Berbice Uprising, that is unity. The Demerara Revolution, 1823, unity. The 11th of May, 2015, unity. Unity is him plus her working together. Elders plus youth to empower. You plus me to devour each other? No, but to conquer, to prosper. Now I ask, what are your aspirations in life? My aspiration in life is to make such a great impact in my time that my name and face could be found on every search engine that exists, in every newspaper they publish, on every television station they own, on billboards across the globe, that when my mother and father sees me, they will say, that's our daughter. She has made us proud. That's a fighter. That's an African. And I quote, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Our aspiration in life is to win. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this. It's called The Code of Human Behavior, the great book of divine ordinances. Translation of the Papyri NY, NBSI, and INSC. So thank you very much.